Okay, I think we're live now. So welcome everybody. Welcome to our first edition of the DevRel Hangouts from SmartBear. So what this is all about is we just want to create a connection point between the DevRel function at SmartBear and our broad customer and community base. So we're doing our best to strive to make these Hangouts as informative, interactive, and valuable for you as possible, while also keeping a little element of fun, because after all, when we're building great software, it should be an enjoyable process. That being said, we do want to have these sessions hopefully to be insightful on kind of what's happening across our suite of products from a SmartBear perspective, what we're doing across our open source projects, and the adjacent communities that we find ourselves engaging with as well. And of course, we will do our best to be joined by industry experts so that they can share their experiences and perspectives on software quality. And software quality will be that thread that will be joining and linking all of our Hangouts together. Now, of course, today is Halloween, so it behoves us to adopt a bit of a spooky software shockers theme. And we thought it would be a bit of a fun idea that we will have a newsroom type of setting for today's session. So with that, we're going to get started, and we're going to do a little special report on a scary tale of that is brought to us by our friends who are coming from the horrible software histories. And this is going to be narrated by our wonderful colleague, Alexandra McDougall. And it's all about a recent, but of course, set in bygone times. But we will see if you can pick out the spooky API exploration or exploitation vulnerability. And feel free to drop your hints or your comments in the chat, and we'll fill you in a little bit later on what the shocker was all about. So with that, we will play.
On a misty summer night in the shadowy kingdom of Autolandia, there was a chilling whisper of dread that crept through the cobbled streets. The villagers clutched their cloaks tightly, casting wary glances at their trusted carriages. The Kia were dependable steeds, swift and silent, always ready to carry passengers safely home through the darkest of nights. But in the first quarter of the strawberry moon, a sinister force was at work. The kingdom had long been plagued by a band of restless spirits known as the Cyber Specters, ghostly hackers who lurked in the shadows, eager to haunt anything with a spark of magic. For years, the Kia carriages had been safe from their wicked ways, until the night the Spectres found the hidden crack in the Kia's defenses. The Spectres had uncovered a dark charm within the Kia's protective spells, a crack that allowed them to possess the carriages themselves. With just a sinister incantation, or a few ghostly codes, as the dark wizards called them, the Spectres could slip inside a Kia carriage, unlock its doors, and take it on a midnight joyride, with or without its owner's consent. Word of the haunting spread quickly, filling the kingdom with an icy fear. Families huddled together, whispering of carriages possessed, steering themselves away into the foggy night. The villagers could almost hear the ghostly laughter of the Spectres echoing through the darkened streets. The wise engineers of Kia, hearing the frightened whispers, gathered by candlelight to craft a new spell, one strong enough to exorcise the specters from every haunted carriage. With ancient scrolls and magic codes, they toiled through the witching hours, weaving a protective enchantment to shield the Kias from the ghostly grip of the Specters. As the engineers labored, the villagers took precautions of their own, never leaving their carriages alone on deserted streets and parking them close to home where the shadows were fewer. But even then, the haunting presence lingered in the air. Finally, on the night of the full moon, the engineers emerged with their spell, a powerful charm that would banish the Specters for good. They called upon every villager to bring their Kia carriage to receive the new ward, a spectral shield that would close the haunted gap forever. With the spell in place, the Kia carriages once again became safe to roam the foggy streets of Autolandia. protected from possession, their ghostly ordeal finally over. As the villagers breathed a sigh of relief, the cyber specters slunk back into the shadows, defeated, but always watching for another way in. And so, on this Halloween night, the Kia carriages can ride through the kingdom under the pale moonlight, silent and safe once more, while the ghostly whispers of the specters echo in the distance, a haunting reminder to the villagers to always beware. For in Autolandia, no charm is truly eternal, and the shadows are never empty.
Well, that was pretty spooky. Thanks very much for that, Alexandra. Okay, so moving on, let's bring you some of the latest news headlines from the SmartBear stable. And first up, we are delighted to announce that SmartBear has been recently announced as a leader in the 2024 Gartner Magic Quadrant for API Management. Now, we believe this is down to multiple factors. Firstly, it's our understanding of the API market, and we've continued to enhance our API capabilities there across Swagger Hub for API design documentation, as well as publishing into our showroom, which is our developer portal capabilities, API exploration to our Swagger Hub Explorer, all the way through functional testing for Ready API, of course, contract testing as well through Packflow, and then merging in the stoplight capabilities for enhanced governance. Secondly, we're always trying to support our customers from an execution perspective, helping them navigate the increasing complexity across the API landscape. And lastly, from an innovation perspective, we believe that some of the AI augmented enhancements that we're bringing in across the different phases of the API lifecycle contributed, as well as, of course, our commitment to working with the standards organizations and helping drive forward API standards and specifications. We also have entered into open public beta for our AI augmented contract testing capabilities, and this is all aimed at reducing the barrier to entry for contract testing and really fits well with adding contract testing into existing code bases. So this is all powered with our SmartBear Halo AI capabilities, and it will allow us to automatically generate and maintain contract tests, acting as that intelligent partner for us as we're extending our code bases. So feel free to check out the links that will start appearing for you in your different platforms. We've done some great work for revamping the Swagger documentation pages. So this is all aimed at improving our overall websites and modernizing them as much as possible. So we've improved performance there, really hitting 100 out of 100 on performance scores. We've enabled light mode and dark mode all down to the Astro themes that we're using. And of course, this now all sits in GitHub. So we're happy to receive contributions from folks who spot any issues in our documentation and would like to contribute to improving our Swagger docs. So a huge shout out to Doug Clark and the web team here at SmartBear for making that happen. So that's pretty much the headlines from a SmartBear stable perspective, but let's look at what's happening across the API specification land. And of course, that's very near and dear to our hearts here at SmartBear. First up, the Open API initiative have launched 2 new patch versions for their 3 and 3.1 versions of the API, the Open API specification. So 3.0.4 and 3.1.1 have been released, and these are the first releases since 2021. We should think about this really as the release of words means things edition. So the releases themselves don't contain any let's say meaningful changes to the way that APIs are described, but it's really all about focused on updates, expansions, and clarifications on points where ambiguity may have existed for implementers. So we now have much more clear, concise language around what to call these things, whether it's documents, descriptions, or definitions. We also have improved documentation and clarity on resolving references and parsing documents, a whole load of information around data type clarifications, as well as security concerns, and much, much more. So there's been improvements across the examples and the learning aspects as well. We also have recently launched, or the Open API initiative, should I say, have recently launched a brand new specification called the overlay specification. This is an auxiliary standard to complement the existing Open API spec itself. And an overlay is really just a list of repeatable actions that can be made on top of an existing API description. And this gives teams an ability to transform an Open API description as it moves through the lifecycle. So I like to think of it a little bit like layers in Photoshop, and you can layer on or layer off concerns as they are relevant for the specific audience. So it's all targeted at improving the developer experience. So we can, for example, use an overlay to improve descriptions and examples in a particular API description. This is particularly useful if you have generated that original or base description from code. You can also think about it as a filtering mechanism. So if you have experimental or perhaps deprecated endpoints, you can use an overlay to remove those before you publish the API description publicly. Perhaps you want to do localization. So again, you can overlay on translations for things like your descriptions, your titles, your summaries, etc. And of course, it's very, very useful for tool-specific content. So additional enrichment or metadata that we need to embed into our descriptions for compatibility with API gateways or SDK code generators, etc. So we can add them in at the right point in time in the process, and we don't have to make the description verbose for the human consumers who are not that interested in it. And again, pointing to the fact that OpenAPI has now evolved from being a single specification project to now a multiple specification project under the Linux Foundation. In case you missed the news over the last couple of months, we also launched the Erazo specification underneath the OpenAPI initiative. And this is all about being able to describe sequences of calls in a programming language agnostic mechanism, but in a human and machine readable way to really help us achieve our jobs to be done. So it tackles many, many use cases, from acting as living documentation for workflows and integration guides to automating, should I say, the SDK and code generation, to test case generation, as well as providing deterministic instructions for AI agents. So it's been quite a busy couple of months for the Open API initiative, and we're delighted to see the progress that's happening there. Now, of course, it is Halloween night, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, so we are going to bring you some spooky software shockers, and our investigative reporter, Yousaf Nabi, is in the field. And I'm going to transfer over to Yousaf to fill us in on some of the strange things that have been reported from around the globe. Yousaf.
Thank you very much, Frank. So happy Halloween, everyone. I'm here to talk about some strange and spooky software defects that can occur that we've spotted. And maybe we'll take some time after in a panel session to discuss what we've seen and how people can look to resolve some of those issues earlier in their life cycle. So it might be pertinent for us to think about what poor software quality can lead to. It can have lasting impacts for you, your organization, and your end users. It can affect things like safety. It can lead to litigation. It can impact your company's reputation. It can potentially have financial impact. And it can also lead to security implications, the potential of your organization being infiltrated and its data being sold. So what can we kind of think about in order to mitigate some of these issues? So software quality can thought about being validated throughout the software delivery lifecycle. And if we can take shift left mantra, defects are cheaper to resolve the earlier we find them in the software development lifecycle. But that doesn't mean we might not find defects later in the lifecycle. If we do, we should not only try and understand why that defect occurred, but potentially look at means of identifying or testing for those defects earlier in our process. And a good engineer once that I spoke to said, I always think about software quality as always coding as if the developer who ends up maintaining your code will be a violent psychopath who knows where you live. And if you imagine that kind of mantra in your head when you're committing codes for a pull review, pull request, it might consider you to think about what quality measures are you taking to ensure that code will work as you expect it to do today, but also in the future. So with a future mindset, let's take a look at some software glitches that happen because people maybe didn't think about some edge cases. So there are two hard problems in computer science: cache invalidation and naming things. Error messages are no exception. When in doubt, leave it up to the user's imagination. And the invisible man, he's not the only one struggling to verify his identity. This person wasn't able to enter their password at all. And passwords are really hard to remember, but it's really hard if you can't even enter one. But don't worry, this system will let you re-enter your password in 24 days. And it's probably time for a password manager, considering this particular site mandates at least 255 characters for its password. And motivational music, it comes in all forms. I don't think this was the music the listener probably wanted when they went out for their marathon. System preferences. And this Uber driver might be in trouble. His car is in the ocean, and we better hope those electric cars are waterproof. Otherwise, this driver is in for a shock. So this form on Netflix, as Netflix launched their latest series, Unknown Language overtakes Mandarin Chinese as the most popular language in the world. And orange is the new black, and temperature is the new speed. How fast were you going, officer? Do you want that in Fahrenheit or Celsius, sir? And it's not just Bobby tables you need to worry about in those input forms for your SQL validation. Be sure to block anyone who's 6 foot tall. But it's not all fun and jokes, however. Some of these can really hurt in a cost of living crisis. In this particular example, the default tip amount was 0. So letting these kind of type of defects through the net can have real knock-on implications. In this example, in a tip-based culture, affecting take-home pay for workers will have ripples in the wider economy. So with that in mind, in my special report, I'm going to do a live interview. I'm going to welcome Fran Moreno to the stage. Hi, Fran.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Could you tell me a little bit about yourself? Who are you? Where are you from? And then, in the spirit of our spooky software horrors, could you tell our listeners a spooky horror story of your own?
Okay. Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. It's a pleasure. My name is Fran Moreno. I live in Spain. I've been working in Sngular for 8 years as a chapter lead in quality engineering. And well, in QA, I've been working like, 15 years, more or less. Okay. So one spooky history. I remember in one of my past projects, we have to test a virtual call center. Okay. So this experience was a bit unforgettable, because it was a small company. We didn't have the time and the resources maybe to do it properly.
Yeah.
And the thing is, we had to test the routing and the configuration of the calls. So the thing is that at the end we made actual calls to emergency services like police, hospital, and other critical health centers. So yeah, and I was doing that calls. So the thing is, I have to tell them in advance that I was doing this testing, and sometimes it was like, well, it's you again, and yeah, it's me. Sorry, I have to test. I have to test this virtual call center. The thing is that we didn't have a simulation environment, so we have to make these real calls. So yeah. Also, we didn't have the time or the knowledge to know how to automate these kind of things. I mean, this was like, I don't know, like 10 years ago, more or less. I was.
Yeah, I suppose you definitely don't know what you don't know. And I know from experience the one about needing to build simulation environments through having the inability to control the services that you're calling, but also the importance of checking what you use for test data. I remember a time when we were putting a landing page up for a new product. We've been given some initial copy, but because the end editorial copy wasn't ready, we put a fake number on, but no one actually rang the number, and it was a number for another company. So I always check the copy now. Cool. Thank you so much for that, Fran, for that interview and story. We'll come back to you in a little bit. Thank you.
Thanks.
Right, so the next guest I'll be introducing to this stage is Alejandro Pena. Hi, Alejandro. Can you tell the guests a little bit about you and your spooky software shocker, please?
Of course. Well, thank you for having us here. First off, before presenting myself, I just want to congratulate you on the recognition as leader in Gartner Magic Quadrant for API management. I mean, that's huge.
Thank you. We're all so proud of it here at SmartBear, and we're even prouder that we can share those accolades with our customers. So yeah, thank you, Alejandro. And it's helped by consultancy partners like yourself who help our users get the most out of these tools and implement them in their organization. So yeah, we're really honored to have you here as well. And sharing a spooky software shocker, because it's not often that people take the time to talk about things that go wrong in their world, but the experiences that happen out of them often shape us to become better quality engineers. So
okay, so well, I continue presenting myself. Okay, so my name is Alex. I'm right now the backend chapter lead at Sngular. I have about 15 years already of experience in the industry, always pretty focused on the backend development, okay, but also involved in DevOps, cloud, QE. Well, Yusuf, you know pretty well that the last project I was leading in client for almost 3 years was heavily involved with contract testing and all the API management. We had a lot of conversations about that. But yeah, in my current role, I'm more focused on engineering management, business development, technical office duties without being tied to a specific project. Okay, both positions share this common thread: the identifying and defining the common practices and collaboration with many teams. Okay, I'm a huge fan of the Open API Hub Backflow combo. You know it pretty well as well.
Yeah, so bidirectional contract testing. Yeah,
and I have a lot of curiosity about the Arazu specification. I haven't had enough time, to be honest, to dive into it as deeply as I'd like, but I'm looking forward to know more from you guys.
Maybe if our listeners are interested, maybe we can have a jam session where we all kind of get together and hack on that. Awesome.
So let's jump into the spooky story. Spooky story. So I don't have the narrative abilities that Alexandra has, okay? I will try to do my best. So let me start with this horror story. So it happened a few years ago, okay? It was not a critical issue or something like that with high impact, but I think it was pretty funny. So one day, a team from a different department from where I was working with, came to us, okay? And they came to us and told us like, hey, yeah, we know your experience with APIs and that stuff. So we're running into some issues since we started migrating to REST microservices. And well, we thought that maybe you could lend a hand here. And okay, so I
pull up your sleeve,
totally motivated and ready to help. Okay, jumped in and we get into a meeting, which by the way was in person at that moment, working in the office. And well, they started sharing their concerns. Okay, they tell us that their message structures were constantly changing because they were evolving their API very quickly. This was leading to tons of bugs, rework, and frustration, even in both ends. Blah blah blah. Okay, so perfect context for contract testing, right? It's like, okay, I directly jump straight ahead into the topic. Again, super optimistic. I started with my presentation and all the theory about contract testing with slides and all that stuff. Back then, I liked to give the team's tech leads a foundation talk before diving into the guts of the code. Okay.
It always helps, yeah, to set that base.
Spoiler alert, I changed a bit my mind, and now I like to check the code a little bit before doing that.
Okay.
So, but anyway, after all this theory and speaking, they started to give us a walkthrough of their API, their code. Okay, so what do we find? They had a single post method, right, with just one field, like value or message or whatever. I don't recall the name. Anyway, that's just a parameter, playing a string, okay, in a post method. So what's the deal here? It's like, what problem do you have, guys?
Yeah, you're
problem
is seeing huge APIs, hundreds of endpoints. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was thinking they're gonna have a message like a 10,000 lines of JSON or whatever. But no, just one parameter. The thing was that inside that string, what they were doing was to embed the full XML message as is.
Oh.
I mean, they were literally taking the entire SOAP body from their old API implementation from SOAP and showed it inside this string. So both the consumer and the provider sides were reusing the XML parsing code from their old systems. But of course, every time there was a change on that XML, the thing went completely wild. Okay.
Yeah,
so
I can imagine if they try to.
You can imagine my face in that moment, right? I was like, well, okay, contract testing is not going to help here. We may need to start from the basics and start talking about the REST APIs. And I was there with a department manager who was understandably stunned and a bit frustrated with what he was seeing. But the funny thing is that after we left the meeting, we actually had a good laugh about it once he took off his manager hat, in front of me, and it really lightened the mood. Anyway, and just to be clear and totally honest, I don't just judge at all the team for this. I mean, they were under very big pressure to get the migration done for yesterday, and so they did what they could in the
they often say when you are building a new system or replatforming, you migrate all the technical debt from the old system and magnify it, because
if you go rushing the people, it used to happen, right? So the thing is, that was funny that they didn't came to us saying, hey, they came saying, we have this changing message, format is okay, rather than saying, hey, we need this to meet the deadline, and we need to make it align with the best practice now, or whatever.
Well,
which of course is what we did with them after that. So
I do hope those software engineers have been able to move past that, but if not, they might be pleased to know that we can, in some of the packed DSLs, cater for XML messages. So we might be able to dig them out of that hole. Okay, so thank you very much for that story, Alex. We'll leave you now, and we'll start our panel talk discussion, where we'll bring you back along with the rest of the speakers. Thank you.
Okay. See you.
Awesome. Hi, Frank.
Hey, Youssef, for great stories. Okay, so I think we're going to move into the panel discussion now. So we'll bring everybody on stage.
So Alex and Fran, could I invite you both back on stage, please?
Yeah, I'll bring them back in. Here we go.
Awesome. So hello, everyone. I'm just going to hide our stage so we can get everyone's faces on stage. So we've had a bit of an introduction from Fran, Alex. Joe, do you want to introduce yourself to our readers? No. Alex and Fran and Frank. So at the start of our show, we had a story from Alex McDougall, and Frank asked our readers if they could identify which API vulnerability or recent API vulnerability it was relating to. I'm not sure if we had any answers, but so Frank, maybe you can kick off our discussion with telling us a little bit about what that story was, and then we'll hand over to our panel to have a discussion about it.
Sure. So it actually related to a pretty recent disclosure of an API vulnerability that was experienced by Kia, the car manufacturer. So it was uncovered by some ethical hackers. And what they were actually able to do from 1,000 feet is use a public service to, via the number plate of a Kia car. So this was basically affecting every Kia model produced after 2013. They could use the number plate, use a public service to get the vehicle identification number based on the number plate. From that, they could exploit the dealer APIs as well as the vehicle APIs and the Kia backend APIs. So what they would do is they would register themselves as a car dealer on the Kia network. They would get a dealer token. After getting the VIN information of the vehicle, they could then retrieve some PII data from the owner of that vehicle from the Kia backend. They could use that then to demote the user of the vehicle via the vehicle endpoint, add themselves as a owner, and then from that they could execute actual actions against the Kia vehicle. So this exposes endpoints to the internet that control things like starting and stopping the car, locking and unlocking the car, activating the alarm, the horn, the lights, etc. So they were able to demonstrate that just walking into a car park, they could find a car with its number plate, have it in their control in under 30 seconds. So luckily it's all been patched, and Kia were able to disclose that there were no actual exploitations of this. But again, a very, very interesting case of kind of an API security vulnerability. And maybe Fran, maybe asking you, what type of things do you see with your clients when it comes to, the advice and the strategies for kind of shifting left on API security and making sure that you're taking these kind of orchestrated exploitations into consideration and thinking about the different RBAC type of scenarios that can exist.
Yeah. What I usually see in clients, most of them, as I said before, probably they don't have the proper environments to test or to mock things, or even the pipelines well configured. Okay. So nowadays, when we are talking about this distributed architecture, which is, I think is the more common scenario right now, the distributed architectures, they tend to forget contract testing. I mean, probably that they are very focused on unit testing or integration testing, but I always tell them with contract testing, you can move to left and make tests earlier and detect the problems earlier, because this technology allows you to, this technique allows you to discover miscommunication problems between services much earlier. They tend to forget about this. I don't know if sometimes they don't know the technique, they don't know the tools. Sometimes they don't have the right culture or the courage to start with this. So it's what I usually see in clients.
Thanks, Fran. Alex, how do you think users can be aware of kind of the classes of security vulnerabilities that are out there, and look to use some of those techniques earlier in their code development, things like OWASP maybe?
In this Kia incident, right? I mean, it's difficult to talk about what I would do in a situation like that, because I am assuming everyone is gonna be doing the standard good practice, right? About testing and checking all the security. But
maybe
I mean, it all relies. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, maybe I'd just suggest that because like that vulnerability has been fixed now, but I know there's the OWASP kind of top 10, and that can help users kind of be aware of those leading kind of vulnerabilities that are out there in APIs, and they can potentially use static analysis security tools to help sooner in their pipeline. We've actually got a question in from the audience now, so I'm just going to share a screen and we'll ask this question. So this question's come in from Susie Floss.
You can't fix what you can't see. How are you helping improve visibility into your systems so you know it's working as expected, and therefore you aren't subject to a spooky software horror yourself?
So the question is, you can't fix what you can't see. How are you helping improve visibility into your systems so you know it's working as expected, and therefore you aren't subject to a spooky software horror yourself? Does anyone want to take this?
I can start talking about, I mean, I'm probably going to be pretty obvious in everything I say, but I'll try to summarize the main alternatives or strategies I can think of. I mean, everything starts by logging, for sure. Okay, it's the critical foundation. We should implement a structured logging on different levels with a standard format, logging key interaction points like API requests or user actions, so we can have immediate insights if something looks off. Also centralize these logs, because we are going to be probably in a microservice environment or distributed environment, instead of having to check each log in 100 independent instances. We bring all services together to a single place with tools like Logstash or similar. Then another important point, if I keep continue talking about logging, is the distributed tracing.
Yeah, 100%
so we can
tracing and open telemetry.
Yeah, exactly. To follow all the track of the request where it was moving and this end-to-end visibility. Then we can jump to having real-time dashboards. It's a key role, okay, that also relates to having monitoring systems, alerts, so we can keep an eye on the key metrics and throw an alert. So if something weird happens, so all the team knows immediately, hopefully before it affects the users, the kind of problem we're facing with tools like, I don't know, Grafana or Prometheus. And what else? Well, so also, of course, the regular health checks and self-healing mechanisms with Kubernetes is the most obvious option, okay? So, but finally, and summarizing, everything comes together when you put the focus on the ODD, the observability-driven development, okay? So training and making everyone understand that the observability is key, and we should take that into account when writing the code, okay? So having that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I've seen how when, as coming from a QA track, when we had a shift from kind of on-premises software where everything was deployed in one blob and it kind of ran in the same, building we were working in, to things being distributed in the cloud. When we first deployed our services, we were missing kind of essential pieces, like you mentioned there, distributed tracing. So we had logs from different services, but we couldn't correlate them with particular requests. And as soon as we were able to start correlating them, we could do cool stuff like replay requests through our system. And the thing you mentioned about, taking those observability, the things that you want to achieve in your, your observability metrics and building them as part of your quality strategy early, means that as you evolve your systems, you can leverage that. You can leverage that observability to kind of improve the development of your software going forward.
Yeah, it's really about making it part of the pre-production process as well. So you want to feed that information into where developers can actually utilize it. We always have this grandiose historical kind of premise from an agile perspective that we should be using what's happening with our production deployed software and feeding that into our next iteration, both kind of driving what we do from a requirements perspective, but also from a code hardening perspective. but it's one thing to say it, and it's another thing to make that information visible at the right point in the process. So I think being able
shift
to
left observability.
Yeah, yeah, it is effectively shifting left observability and just making that available at the right point in time. If you make a change to the code, being able to understand, will this have impact on the scalability of the software based on the data that you have already from the current production version of the software.
Awesome.
Totally agree.
I've got one last question from the audience. So I've got Alice Plant, who's got a question.
I keep hearing about AI on the news, ChatGPT or something. Is it going to take my job and make everything safe?
So this is Alice Plant. She's asking, I keep hearing about AI on the news, ChatGPT. I think she means GPT. Is it going to take her job and make everything safe? So we've heard about some software shockers, and generative AI has been in the news. Does anyone want to take this question and see if generative AI is going to help remove some of these software shockers that we've seen? Fran, maybe?
Yeah, I can take that. Yeah. Well, first, I don't think it's going to take our jobs. In any case, it's going to probably probably do us better, because I think it's going to I don't know how to say, it's going to make our job or our techniques richer, because obviously it's a tremendous help. This kind of tools. Well, obviously it's the future. And related to that, if I may, I want to mention, because this year I work in related to the Kia incident. I work here in Sngular in a testing project with another car manufacturer, and the way we test the control unit, the car control unit, was using fuzzy testing, which is related to AI and all of this. We inject like not random, but pseudo random traffic into this control unit, trying to look for defects, malfunction. Sorry. Nice. So yeah, we had to implement these fuzzy testing techniques, and probably AI would help in these scenarios. So well, the thing is, I don't think it's gonna take out our jobs. But
they say work smarter, not harder, and I've definitely found things like Copilot for things that I might have used for where I might have a Stack Overflow kind of question. I can solve things with that, and I can also see, like, I saw great potential when I moved to a really collaborative environment, and kind of aspiring software developers were able to pair with very experienced software developers, and rather than feeling the fear of being chastised by a developer, they were guided and kind of helped. And I think the ability for maybe people to sound some of their ideas with a learning model, although it might, they have to take everything they say with a pinch of salt, but you do that with normal human interaction. I think that can definitely help maybe allay some of that imposter syndrome. Alex or Frank, have you leveraged AI in your day-to-day jobs?
Yeah, I use it quite frequently, really, just to act as almost like a pair programmer with me. I found myself reverting back to writing more of the code myself, because I just enjoy the thinking process as I'm actually writing code. I think it's important for my mental model with regards to how I work. But I like maybe the earlier phase aspects of it, when you're more thinking, instead of you starting with a blank sheet of paper or with just a pencil in your hand, you can kind of provide some context and have a little bit of a mind mapping session with regards to how you're going to lay out different structures, and it can be quite beneficial, quite good there, even if it's trying to understand and help with the software archaeology kind of work, where you're looking at old code and you're trying to make sense of it, and perhaps it's in a language that you're not very proficient with. It can be very useful there to try and give you some good grounding and maybe put you in the seat of what that developer was trying to do at that point in time, or even yourself a year earlier, and you're trying to have that internal monologue, except you can have a persona discuss that with you.
Right. Well, thank you very much for that, Frank. I'm sorry, guests, we're out of time. I just want to say thank you all for being with us for this Spooky Software Shocker special. I want to wish everyone a really great, happy Halloween. I want to say thank you for watching. And our next episode will be December the 5th. It will be live from API Days Paris, a leading API conference. So if you're there in Paris, please come along and say hello. If not, please tune in. We hope you enjoyed it, and you can feel free to reach out and let us know. Thanks again to our guests from Sngular, Alexandra Pena and Fran Moreno.
Thank you for having us.